All you have to do is look around. Things are becoming increasingly turbulent. In recent years, everything seems to be accelerating, as if the world were approaching a point of no return. Threats of war in the East, internal conflicts in countries we once believed to be stable, financial crises that repeat themselves in cycles, each time with greater intensity. And now, the Epstein files flooding social media, bringing disturbing, dark, and deeply unsettling material to the surface. All of this creates a very specific feeling. Something is wrong, something big is coming. Fear, unease, anger, helplessness, a tension that can be felt in the air. But what if this feeling isn't new? Perhaps this is the real game played by those in power. What we perceive today as conflicts, wars, or internal struggles may be nothing more than carefully orchestrated narratives with a single purpose: to capture your mind through fear, to keep you in a constant state of alert, distracted, anxious, always waiting for disaster. Because a frightened mind is easy to control. And what's interesting is that this game didn't begin yesterday. The Book of Revelation was written nearly 2,000 years ago, and even then it spoke of the end, of signs, of catastrophes, of dark times. Throughout history, every generation has felt it was living in the last days. In the Middle Ages, plagues were seen as omens of the end. Around the year 1000, people were literally waiting for Judgment Day. During the World Wars, the apocalypse seemed inevitable. In the Cold War, the nuclear button always felt one step away from being pressed. Today, we speak of wars, collapses, pandemics, artificial intelligence, and global crises, all of it amplified by the media and social networks in a constant bombardment of information that pulls us into a collective state of tension and fear. And you can feel it. The same sensation, the same fear, as if the end, or something immense, were always just around the corner. And so the inevitable question arises: if the apocalypse has been announced for 2,000 years, why does it never arrive? What if it was never about the end of time? What if it was pointing to something else entirely? We can't deny that something intense is happening out there, but it is precisely in moments like this that we need to step back, gain perspective, recognize the cyclical nature of these events, and remember what the great teachers already told us. Jesus spoke of this, and his teachings were recorded by John in the Book of Revelation. A text that, when read literally, seems to announce the end of the world, but when properly understood, can become something very different. Not a book about destruction, but a doorway into the kingdom of heaven. Guided by Bill Donahue, we're about to explore the hidden keys of the Book of Revelation.
The Book of Revelation is not about countries at war and dropping bombs. The war that it refers to is the war that goes on within you, your mind, the thoughts of your mind. And you're going to find how to get in control of yourself. You're going to find how your body works. We're going to start right at chapter 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ to St. John. And that's the first thing you want to try to understand. This revelation is from Christ. In other words, it's a book of statements from that which is Jesus Christ, the Christ consciousness, talking to that which is within you, describing, letting you in on the truth, the real secrets of life and what life is about. The book of Revelation is a book about the human body and the human mind. It has nothing to do with outside things. It's mystical, it's spiritual. And it's written in such a way as to hide it from those who would interpret it literally. Those who do not meditate will never be able to understand the book of Revelation.
Bill Donahue taught and officiated within the church for many years, but he soon realized that something didn't fit. The literal interpretation of the Bible diverted attention from what mattered most: human consciousness. He then began to read the Bible as a symbolic language, where characters, battles, and prophecies are not always historical events, but metaphors for internal states of the mind and spiritual transformation. According to Donahue, these texts contain keys to spiritual awakening and enlightenment, a map for recognizing the truth that has always been within us.
All right, let's go to chapter 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, and this is chapter 1, verse 1, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. Now remember, this is written 2,000 years ago. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John, who bare record of the word of God and of the testimony of Jesus Christ and of all things that he saw. Blessed is he that reads and they that hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. Now isn't that something? Right away, in the first 3 verses of the book of Revelation, you see something. Now that's, I think, the most important statement in those 3 verses. The time is at hand, and that refers to the eternal now. Okay? This isn't a prophecy of something that happens in the future. It's saying to you that if you'll get into this book mystically, begin to understand the deep, holy, secret place within you, then the time is at hand for you to be the beneficiary of this revelation.
According to Bill Donahue's perspective, the first thing we must understand is something fundamental. The Bible, and especially the book of Revelation, was never meant to be a prophecy about a distant future, nor a literal prediction of external events yet to come. It never was. These texts were written in a deeply symbolic language, rich in metaphors, imagery, and hidden keys. This was not accidental, but a deliberate way of protecting their true meaning. In a time marked by persecution, censorship, and control over thought, this veiled language allowed the knowledge to survive without being destroyed, remaining accessible only to those who were prepared to interpret it. It was not intended for the masses, but for the initiated, for those capable of reading beyond the surface. From this perspective, the Bible ceases to be merely a religious, historical, or moral book. It is no longer just a story, a set of rules, or even a spiritual narrative in the traditional sense. Once its symbolic language is understood, the text transforms before our eyes into something far more profound, a map, a true instruction manual for the awakening of human consciousness. Every image, every number, every scene, the seals, the trumpets, the beasts, the lamb, speaks not of external events, but of internal processes, of states of mind, body, and spirit, of a hidden journey that describes how the human being can elevate consciousness, pass through different levels of understanding, and ultimately access a higher plane of perception and illumination. For Donahue, Revelation does not announce the end of the world, but the end of a way of seeing reality. It does not describe a global catastrophe, but an inner revelation. And it is precisely when the text is read through this symbolic lens that its true purpose is revealed: to guide the human being through their own process of spiritual transformation.
John, to the 7 churches which are in Asia. Grace be unto you, and peace from him which is, and which was, and which is to come, and from the 7 spirits which are before his throne. Now remember, as you enter into the book of Revelation, it's loaded with numerology. Loaded with numerology. All of these numbers have a meaning. They mean something, okay? The 7 churches are symbols of the 7 spinal centers, which are called chakras. They are within you. They start at the base of the spine. They work their way up the spine to that which is the pituitary and the pineal gland. Those are the 7 seals. Those are the 7 churches. Those are the 7 chakras, okay? And they line up exactly in our Christian book of Revelation with that which is the ancient Hindu and the ancient Eastern Sanskrit descriptions of the 7 chakras. The book of Revelation takes from the most ancient. It takes from the ancient Hindu. It takes from that which is the Kabbalah, and it's formulated for an entire understanding of that which is the spirit. See, and what I am telling you is that what was the ancient belief was that as each one of these 7 churches or 7 chakras, the seal is opened, you then elevate your consciousness to a higher realm of understanding with God. In other words, you climb the stairs to the upper room. The 7 chakras are the 7 steps that bring you from the basement, so to speak, to that which is the upper room.
When Donahue speaks of ascending to the upper room, he is not referring to a physical place or an external heaven accessed after death. He is talking about an internal transmutation, a profound process of consciousness transformation. The ascent begins in the lower centers, in what he calls the carnal mind, the level of awareness dominated by fear, survival instincts, impulses, anger, desire, and the constant preoccupations of the ego. And it is no coincidence that this is exactly the mental state in which we are kept most of the time today. Wars, crises, constant threats, headlines designed to alarm. An unceasing flow of narratives that appeal directly to the most basic centers of our mind. Because a consciousness trapped in fear does not rise, does not question, does not see clearly. It reacts. And a mind that only reacts is easy to control. According to Donahue, this is not just a modern phenomenon, but a principle deeply understood since ancient times. That is why the Apocalypse describes a reverse path, a process of elevation that moves from these lower centers toward the more subtle levels of being. As the seals are opened, or as the chakras are activated, energy begins to rise through the spine. Consciousness elevates, and with each step, something dissolves. Fear loses its grip, mental noise quiets, and identification with the ego loosens. This ascent is neither moral nor ideological. It is vibrational. It is not about believing something new, but about leaving the mental state where fear rules. When the upper centers are reached, we enter what Donahue calls the upper room, an inner realm where the mind ceases to be the master and becomes a tool. A state in which we are no longer controlled by external narratives because we have learned to observe them without being trapped by them. This is what many traditions have called Christ consciousness, not as a historical figure, but as a state of heightened perception. A level of awareness from which the power of fear is broken, because it can no longer find purchase.
Remember, Jesus said he could do nothing, but the Father within him did the work, and the same Father is within you, and the things that he did you can do, and you can do greater things. Understand something, that Jesus referred or called that which is the right hemisphere of the brain, because he sat at the right hand of the Father. The right hemisphere of the brain he called Father, okay? Father is not a person. Father is that which is within you. In John 14:23, it says that if you chose this pathway, he and the Father would dwell within you. Christ consciousness in the right hemisphere of the brain is Jesus and the Father dwelling within you, making that triumvirate of love and peace. Now, where it says in Revelation 1:5, he's the first begotten of the dead, that means the firstborn from the flesh to the higher domain by the willingness to yield the 5 senses or total being to God. That is the awakening of the dormant intuition of man to divine intuition. Those 5 senses, okay, are sight, taste, touch, smell, hearing. Something will get you in trouble.
What Donahue is pointing to here completely changes the traditional image of Jesus. When Jesus says, "I can do nothing of myself, the Father within me does the work," he is not placing power outside of the human being. He is pointing inward. According to Donahue's interpretation, the Father is not a distant deity or a person in the sky, but a higher level of consciousness operating within us. This is why the symbolism of the right side matters so much. Sitting at the right hand of the Father is not about a throne in heaven, but about functioning from what Donahue associates with the right hemisphere of the brain. The intuitive, holistic, non-linear mode of perception, a state where awareness is no longer dominated by fear, fragmentation, or compulsive thought. From this perspective, Jesus is not presented as an exception, but as an example. The works that I do, you shall do also, and greater. Not because of belief or worship, but because the same inner source operates in everyone. When Revelation speaks of Christ as the first begotten of the dead, Donahue reads this not as a physical resurrection, but as the first awakening from identification with the flesh, with the senses, with the reactive mind. The first to fully transcend the dominance of the five senses, sight, taste, touch, smell, and hearing, and bring them into alignment with a higher intelligence. In this sense, death is not the end of life, but the end of unconscious living. And resurrection is the awakening of what Donahue calls divine intuition, a level of awareness that no longer reacts automatically to the world, but perceives it from a higher plane. The message is radical in its simplicity. The same consciousness that operated through Jesus is not meant to be admired from a distance, but activated within. And that activation begins when the senses stop ruling us and start serving something higher.
Those five senses, if they are under the control of the carnal mind, then you're in hell. When they come under the control of the divine mind, you're in heaven. That was the creation of Lucifer. Lucifer means bright star. There was no man named Lucifer. He was not a person per se. The Bible gives him the name of Lucifer because it means bright star, and the bright star has 5 points, the symbol of that star. And the 5 points represent sight, taste, touch, smell, hearing, the 5 senses. When they are under the control of the higher nature, that's Lucifer, that is divine. When they are under the control of the ego or the flesh, then that is Satan, that is carnal, okay? So therefore, when Lucifer, allegorically in the Bible, yielded the 5 senses from God to the higher mind to the lower mind, he became Satan, okay? Now, if you remember, it's the same story that we see in the book of David and Goliath. When David went against the beast, which was Goliath, what happened? The entire armies of Israel couldn't touch Goliath. That means all of religion couldn't move. They couldn't touch the beast. They just stood there. What could they do? A child comes. No religious background, no affiliation with any religion. And we know this because when the child David came, Saul said, "Here, you've got to put on my armor." And David tried it on. He said, "I can't move in this stuff." In other words, I can't be this religion or that religion or this religion or that religion because it's hindering me. I can't be free. I can't be free to understand. I can't be free to mix into the things of the world. I can't be free to embrace that which is all mankind. He said, I can't do this. I got to take your armor off. I can't follow your rules or regulations. And when he did, then David scooped up 5 smooth stones. They represent sight, taste, touch, smell, hearing. He had to take all 5. If he had only taken 4, he could have left taste, and it could have been something he drank, something he ate. It could have been alcohol, whatever. You understand what I'm saying? And when he took that one stone with the builders rejected, that's that one stone, that's the pineal. Bang, he hit the beast where? In the forehead. The sign of the intellect. Oh, brother. And then Jesus took the 5 wounds, and he who was Jesus became the Christ, and that is submitting the 5 senses to what? To that which is the divine crucifixion.
What Donahue points out here may be one of the most radical aspects of his entire interpretation. For him, heaven and hell are not destinations after death, but states of consciousness. When the 5 senses are governed by the carnal mind, by the ego, fear, and desire, the human being lives an inner hell. But when those same senses come under the guidance of what he calls the divine mind, or Christ consciousness, the experience is transformed. That which many traditions have described as the kingdom of heaven is revealed to us. From this symbolic reading, Lucifer and Satan cease to be external entities. Lucifer, the bright star, represents the luminous potential of the senses when they are aligned with a higher consciousness. Satan symbolizes the opposite, the senses under the control of the ego, fragmenting the mind and anchoring it in fear and carnal desires. The story of David and Goliath follows the same inner logic. The giant represents a force that cannot be overcome through rigid systems or external authority. It can only be surpassed when the individual frees themselves from imposed structures and acts from a clear and unconditioned consciousness. The 5 stones symbolize mastery of the senses, and the strike to the forehead points to a higher center of perception traditionally associated with the pineal gland or the inner eye. For Donahue, this transformation does not occur through blind faith, but through practice. Meditation plays a key role as a means of reversing the inner hierarchy, no longer being ruled by the carnal mind and turning it into our servant. In stillness and observation, consciousness begins to rise. What the Hindu tradition calls Kundalini energy ascends through the inner centers, unlocking them and allowing prana, the vital energy, to flow freely. Through this, one gains access to what Donahue described as primordial consciousness. Donahue maintained that these teachings and practices offer powerful tools to navigate turbulent times, like those we are currently experiencing, in which fear constantly tries to drag our consciousness downward. Through meditation and control of the carnal mind and the senses, we can transcend the traps that evil imposes on us, positioning ourselves on a more positive current of life and attracting events aligned with that state. This is inner alchemy, interpreted in this case through biblical symbolism. Bill Donahue passed away recently at the age of 91. This video is a small tribute to his legacy. I invite anyone who wishes to explore his extensive work, now available on his YouTube channel. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope this information has been useful, inspiring, and enriching. See you soon.